him off me!
I still remember my father telling me that he had watched Terminator 2 in a movie theatre, and the person sitting a few seats away from him had never known anything about the previous film. When the hallway scene with the bouquet and the handgun happened, my father said he had never heard anyone gasp that loudly in his life. You understand that the T-1000 is very evil, but you would never think that the T-800 is actually good. I often think about that and feel envious of the experience that man must have had. And that very moment is the reason why Terminator 2 is not just a sequel, but a rare psychological twist on the audience. And then, when the smoke of the guns settles a series of behind-the-scenes truths even more shocking than the twist itself begin to emerge. The CGI scenes were actually created using mirrors and twin sisters. Dyson's death was constructed from real-life trauma cases. The film nearly received an X rating due to extreme levels of violence. And today, we open the behind-the-scenes door of Terminator 2, 1991 once again. 20. Some scenes were done with mirrors and twins, not CGI.
Get out of the way, John! John!
There is a scene in Terminator 2 that even today many people are sure was CGI, the moment in the mental hospital when Sarah Connor faces herself. That spine-chilling feeling makes the audience assume only a computer could do this. But no, there was no computer graphics involved at all. The person standing behind the mirror was actually Leslie Hamilton, the real-life twin sister of Linda Hamilton. And the interesting part is that there was no mirror at all. The two sisters stood facing each other in the same real space, copying every movement, every glance with near-perfect precision. The camera was placed cleverly so that the human brain automatically accepted it as a reflection. Cameron even repeated this trick in another scene when the T-1000 continues to mimic Sarah. No CGI, no complicated post-production. Just two real people, identical costumes and careful planning down to every frame. This wasn't just a cost-saving measure, although at the time CGI was very expensive and limited. It is proof of an old filmmaking philosophy that is rarely seen today. If you can fool the eye with real techniques, do it by hand first. And perhaps because of that, the scene still holds up even today. 19. Alien Easter egg hidden in the steel factory. At the climax of Terminator 2, when the chase moves into the steel factory, the pace is so intense that most of the audience focuses solely on the T-1000 and the heavy collisions. But if you slow down a bit and look at the background, you'll notice a very familiar feeling. Curved pipes like a spine, rough, wet metal blocks, industrial light reflecting off surfaces that feel both mechanical and organic. For anyone who has seen Aliens 1986, that sensation is almost instinctive. This is the world of Alien. And it's not a coincidence. James Cameron didn't just direct Terminator 2, he also shaped the aesthetic of Aliens. The steel factory in T2 carries a lot of visual DNA from the xenomorph space stations and hives cold industrial machines that feel alive humans dwarfed by massive structures that don't care about them. There's no official explanation from Cameron, but the production designers admitted that they borrowed that feeling intentionally. Not to show off, but as a subtle nod for attentive viewers. 18. Dyson's death scene was built from real-life trauma. You probably remember that moment in the smoke-filled room with alarm sirens blaring. Miles Dyson leans against the wall, blood soaking through his shirt. hands trembling as he grips the detonator. His breath coming in short, uneven gasps, the kind of sound that makes the audience naturally hold their breath. This scene is haunting, not because it is tragic, but because it is so real. Dyson doesn't die the movie way. His body betrays him every second, chaotic breathing, a breaking voice, consciousness flickering as his lungs fail to function normally. The reason for such an authentic portrayal is that James Cameron intentionally built the moment based on real reactions of severely injured patients, particularly those with chest trauma and respiratory failure. He wanted Dyson's death to feel raw, uncomfortable, and denied the audience the comfort of a beautiful death. Joe Morton understood this perfectly. Before filming, he studied medical records, reviewed footage of dying patients to grasp a crucial detail. People close to death often lose control over their breathing and speech, and it is their conscious struggle to remain aware that is most painful. So in the scene, Morton does not act emotion. He lets his body lead heavy breathing, wandering eyes, words cut off mid-sentence. And it is precisely this lack of theatricality that makes the scene one of the most human and unforgettable moments in Terminator 2. 17. The music of Terminator 2. Just a few opening beats and you know you're stepping into the world of Terminator. That heavy, cold, metallic sound doesn't just open the film, it stamps the atmosphere with a sense of inescapability. For Terminator 2, Brad Fiedel returned and did something that seemed impossible. He elevated one of the most iconic film themes in cinema history. If the first film leaned heavily on raw, almost soulless electronic sounds in T2, Fiedel made the music bigger, denser, and more intense. The action rhythms operate like a machine of chilling precision, while the haunting recurring melodies always evoke the looming prospect of an impending apocalypse. Listening to the score, you can imagine molten steel tank treads crushing pavement and a future collapsing with every second. The theme for the T-1000 is particularly terrifying, cold, slick, and emotionless. In contrast, the main theme of Terminator 2 carries a tragic grandeur, both a warning and a sense of fate. The soundtrack even stayed on the Billboard charts for 6 weeks, reaching number 70, a rare achievement for film music at that time. The film also made its mark by using rock music in exactly the right moments. Bad to the Bone, already familiar to audiences, suddenly takes on an entirely new tone when paired with Arnold's T-800 ironic, yet perfectly fitting. Then there's Guns N' Roses' You Could Be Mine, fierce, rebellious, delivering the chaotic energy that Terminator 2 needed. So much so that it's hard to imagine the film without it. 16. Nearly received an X rating due to violence. No one would have thought that with just one misstep, Terminator 2 could have collapsed at the box office. The film came very close to an X rating. In the early 1990s, the MPAA controlled violent content extremely strictly, and T2 kept pushing right up to the red line. The first cut contained too many images deemed over the top. The T-1000 killing people coldly and directly. The arm transforming into a blade, head and neck impalements, and Sarah Connor's intense nuclear nightmare sequences all combined into an experience the MPAA considered beyond the limits of an R rating. The warning was very clear, either cut or receive an X. At that time, an X rating was almost a commercial death sentence. Many theatres wouldn't screen it, the press wouldn't run ads, and mainstream audiences were practically blocked. James Cameron didn't choose confrontation. He and his team adjusted the editing rhythm, shortened some of the most violent moments, and restrained the amount of blood while still maintaining a sense of threat. The result was that Terminator 2 retained its R rating, but it was truly a narrow escape. Just a few more frames and box office history could have taken a completely different turn. 15. Weapons were made bigger to fit Arnold. Recall the scene where the T-800 walks out of the armory, a minigun slung over his shoulder, moving slowly, as if the weight of that metal is negligible. What made that scene so striking was not just Arnold's presence, but also the size of the guns in his hands. The truth is, many of the weapons in Terminator 2 were not built to standard scale. Arnold Schwarzenegger is over 6 feet tall, with broad shoulders and arms like tree trunks. When real guns of normal size were placed in his hands, they looked small, losing their sense of danger. On screen, that was unacceptable. To solve this, the props team did something very Cameron. They enlarged the guns. They worked with weapons experts to adjust the size, grips, barrels and mounts so that each weapon looked proportional to the T-800's physique. The M134 minigun was already huge, but when mounted on Arnold, it was further modified to appear even heavier and more menacing, like a natural extension of the killing machine. 14. Arnold, struggled with the famous shotgun. When talking about Terminator 2, it's hard to forget the scene where the T-800 rides a motorcycle while spinning a shotgun to reload. It looks like something only a machine could pull off. But behind that machine-like spin was a lot of sweat and real pain. The gun used was a Winchester Model 1887, which was not designed to be used with one hand, let alone spinning it while riding a Harley motorcycle. The gun was heavy. Its mechanics were stiff, and the large trigger loop added to assist the flip made it even harder to control. Schwarzenegger ran into constant trouble while practicing this scene. The shotgun's metal lever kept hitting his fingers, causing noticeable bruising and swelling. Eventually, he had to wear a padded glove to continue practicing without damaging his hands. Even so, it took weeks of rehearsal for the movement to be smooth enough to film. For some takes, the crew had to use a lighter version of the shotgun to reduce the risk of injury. The flip lasts only a few seconds on screen, but it became one of the most iconic images in action movie history, a Terminator fully mastering its weapon speed and situation. 13. The T-1000 costume was so tight, Robert Patrick couldn't sit. Let's look at the character T-1000. The cold, sleek appearance of this character comes from the costume. But the strange thing is that the suit was so tight that Robert Patrick, who played the T-1000, literally could not sit down while wearing it. Robert Patrick's costume was tailored to be as form-fitting as possible. The filmmakers wanted the T-1000 to look smooth, sharp, and like a machine with no bulky or unnecessary details. This made him look like liquid metal forced into human shape, rather than a police officer in normal clothing. As a result, once the suit was zipped up and secured, Patrick could not sit. Bending over was also very difficult. During breaks between takes, instead of sitting in a chair, he had to lean against a special support frame just to relax his body for a moment. Nevertheless, despite the discomfort, the suit was effective in making the T-1000 look like a perfect, unstoppable machine. 12. The nuclear nightmare scene was highly accurate. Next, let's revisit one of the most haunting scenes in the film Sarah Connor's Nuclear Nightmare. This is a scene that even today many experts still call one of the most realistic depictions of a nuclear explosion ever shown on screen. In the dream, Sarah stands in a playground watching children play carefree, a serene image that is painfully peaceful. Then, from the horizon, a blinding flash erupts silent for a moment before hell breaks loose. The shockwave hits, tearing everything apart, reducing buildings to ashes. A wall of fire sweeps across the city, and Sarah is burned alive in a scream of despair, her hands still gripping the molten metal fence. What makes this scene frightening is not just the emotion but the accuracy. Many experts later remarked that the sequence of light heat and shockwave closely matches what would happen in a real nuclear detonation. Cameron carefully studied scientific materials and consulted specialists to construct this scene. That is why this scene remains impactful even today. 11. The Cyberdyne building was actually a real bank.
Ready to rock? Ready.
Time to go. Now.
Let me take you to one of the film's key locations, the Cyberdyne Systems headquarters, where the seeds of Skynet were silently being formed. On screen, it looks like a cutting-edge tech research center, but in reality, it was a very ordinary building. The exterior shots of Cyberdyne were filmed at an office building in Fremont, California, later used by Security Pacific Bank. The production chose this location because of its modern, angular and cold architecture, which was convincing enough to become the sanctuary of future microprocessors without needing to build a fake set. When the characters break into the building to destroy Skynet research, the hallways, glass offices and workspaces you see are all real. The massive explosion in the climax was carried out under strict supervision from local authorities. The crew had to use special effects rig safety teams and permits to ensure that fireballs and gunfire caused no actual damage. And to this day, that building still stands. 10. Edward Furlong's voice changed.
But there was this one guy, he was kind of cool. He taught me engines.
Okay, that's good. Up high. 5 low.
During filming, Edward Furlong was 13 years old when he was cast as John Connor. But like many teenagers, his body was still developing, and that included his voice, which broke during the course of production. Because the film was shot over several months, Furlong's voice in early scenes and later scenes was noticeably different, sometimes higher and more juvenile, sometimes deeper, closer to an adult's. This caused quite a headache for the crew. A John Connor suddenly sounding older midway through the film was unacceptable. To fix this, the filmmakers had Furlong re-record many lines in post-production. But ironically, when he did, his voice had become too deep. So the sound team had to do the opposite, pitch it up in certain sections to maintain continuity. If you've never noticed this, it's a testament to the success of the sound department. 9. The Terminator's awkward smile was cut.
That's good. Maybe you could practice in front of a mirror or something.
In a deleted scene, John Connor tries to teach the T-800 how to smile, hoping it will help him look normal around humans. But few people know that this scene didn't appear in the theatrical release, yet it added a strange, humorous and humanizing touch to the T-800. What happens next is one of the most unnatural and mechanical facial expressions ever filmed at the time. The T-800 stands still, with a cold, emotionless face, then slowly pulls his mouth into what is supposed to be a friendly smile. But the result looks like a stiff grimace, as if the machine is malfunctioning. For this reason, James Cameron decided to cut the scene from the theatrical release. He worried that the moment would disrupt the film's pacing, making the T-800 appear ridiculous, while the story moved toward heavy ethical choices and tragedy. However, when included in later extended editions, the smile scene became beloved by many for the awkward humour it provided. 8. Arnold didn't actually carry extremely heavy objects in Terminator 2.
No. I have to stay functional until the mission is complete.
You might think Arnold Schwarzenegger struggled to lift or carry extremely heavy objects in the film, especially in scenes where the Terminator effortlessly handles weapons and defeats enemies. But the truth is, even though Terminator 2 contains many action scenes and moments showcasing immense strength, Arnold didn't actually carry the full weight in the most demanding shots. Props were made lighter to ensure safety and make filming practical. A specific example is the M1C4 minigun used by the T-800. In real life, the actual weapon weighs over 38 kilojoules, not including the ammo belt. On set, the gun Arnold carried was hollowed out and significantly reduced in weight. Some shots even used only a shell without any functioning mechanism. The remarkable thing is that audiences never noticed. Thanks to clever design camera angles and precise editing, every movement still looks completely convincing. 7. The motorcycle and truck chase almost got cut. Do you remember the motorcycle and truck chase? One of the most breathtaking action sequences in the film, John Connor rides the dirt bike through the drainage canal. The T-1000 roars behind in a massive semi-truck, and the T-800 appears on his Harley at the crucial moment. It's an iconic scene, but ironically, it almost didn't make it into the movie. The reason was simple money. This sequence consumed a massive budget reel, vehicles, professional stunt performers, numerous safety measures, and shutting down the entire Los Angeles drainage canal. The studio executives worried that costs would spiral out of control and even proposed trimming or completely cutting the scene. James Cameron strongly opposed this. He argued that it was not just an action scene, but the moment John first truly believes the Terminator is on his side. Without it, the film's central relationship would lose its impact. In the end, Cameron convinced the studio and the crew shot the scene using practical effects, real stunts, and entirely without CGI. That bold choice resulted in one of the greatest chase sequences in the history of action cinema. 6. The T-1000's liquid metal appearance required inventing new technology. Recall the moment the T-1000 steps onto the tiled floor, its body closing in on itself like living mercury. In 1991, this was not just a shocking image, it was something that had never existed in cinema. The idea of a liquid metal assassin could not be achieved with make-up mechanical models or conventional filming tricks. Therefore, Industrial Light and Magic had to take a daring step, invent technology, while the film was already in production. They developed custom software, new morphing animation systems, and completely new rendering pipelines solely to bring the T-1000 to life. ILM performed early 3D scans of Robert Patrick and used morphing algorithms to make his body melt, pierce and reshape right before the audience's eyes. Each second of such effects took multiple days to render. The process was so advanced that it was like building an entire tech company inside the movie studio. This was one of the very first films to use photorealistic CGI on a human character, and the effect remains convincing even more than 3 decades later. 5. Robert Patrick, trained to run without heavy breathing or blinking. Robert Patrick, who played the T-1000, set out to make his entire physical performance as machine-like as possible, including running fast without heavy breathing, not blinking much, and showing no emotion. In the scene where the T-1000 chases John Connor through the drainage channel, Patrick was actually running at full speed, but his face remained expressionless. His gaze fixed and his chest barely moved. He trained for weeks to control his breathing to achieve this. At the same time, Patrick deliberately minimized blinking because he believed blinking is a biological reflex. A machine doesn't need it. Even his running form, stride, and arm movements were carefully studied to remove any trace of human. The result is a villain who doesn't roar or perform dramatic gestures, yet still gives the audience chills. The T-1000 doesn't look like it's hunting, he is simply advancing, tireless and unhesitating. This inhuman control is what made Robert Patrick one of the most terrifying villains in action movie history. 4. One of the first films promoted on the internet. Back in 1991, when Terminator 2 was released, most audiences didn't even know what the internet was. No social media, no official movie websites, no on-demand trailers. For the majority of people, film promotion was still limited to TV newspapers and theatre posters. Yet T2 quietly took a step ahead. The studio partnered with Quantum Link, a service for Commodore computers, which would later become America Online (AOL). On that very rudimentary platform, they posted press releases, promotional images, behind-the-scenes information, and early updates about the film. Not many people could access it, but those who did felt like they were touching the future. Today, this may sound small, even trivial. But in the early 1990s, it was a bold experiment. Hollywood had no idea the internet would become the center of mass media. Terminator 2 had already stepped in first, much like its own story, a message from the future arriving in the present a few beats early. 3. Linda Hamilton, trained like a soldier to become Sarah Connor.
Most of the guys my mom hung around with were geeks.
Unlike the first film, where Sarah was just a panicked waitress swept up in chaos, this time she is a hardened survival warrior, and Hamilton was determined to make that transformation believable. To achieve this, she underwent rigorous training for over 3 months. The regimen included physical conditioning, weapons training, and combat techniques. She worked with Uzi Gal, a former Israeli Special Forces operative, who taught her how to shoot, reload, and move like a professional operative. As a result, everything from how she handles a shotgun to how she clears a room stems from actual tactical training, not just choreographed movements. The physical transformation was equally striking. She lost weight, built muscle, and developed a toned physique with defined arms and shoulders, creating an iconic image for the character. 2. Arnold Schwarzenegger was paid over $21,000 per line of dialogue.
Stay here. I'll be back. Hasta la vista, baby.
This figure alone sums up the entire era of 90s action films. For Terminator 2, Judgment Day, Arnold Schwarzenegger earned a $15 million salary, one of the highest paychecks in Hollywood at the time. The astonishing part is that he spoke very little. Throughout the entire film, Schwarzenegger delivers only about 700 words. That works out to roughly £21 or $429 per word. A line like, "I'll be back," or "Hasta la vista, baby," was worth as much or even more than the annual income of many Americans at the time. Of course, Arnold didn't come to set just to speak a few lines. His role demanded intense physical exertion, hours of makeup, months of fitness training, high-risk motorcycle stunts, weapons training, and most importantly, the enormous marketing pull he brought to the film. Even so, the calculation is still staggering. 1. Action figures. Just by looking at the pile of Terminator toys, you know immediately this is the 90s, the era when an R-rated action film full of guns and death could still proudly enter a child's bedroom. Kenner, the company behind Star Wars and Ghostbusters, was the mastermind behind the Terminator action figure line, and they didn't hold back. I clearly remember the feeling of holding the T-800 in my hands. Pull its arm down hard, and the face flips open, revealing the metallic endoskeleton inside. For a kid, that moment was pure magic. I carried it everywhere, muttering to myself, "I am the Terminator." I wasn't playing John Connor. I was Arnie. Always Arnie. Of course, looking back, many of these toys don't make much sense. The T-800 wears a pink shirt. The T-1000 doesn't look like Robert Patrick. Terminators have their own vehicles, gas masks, things that never appeared in the film. But who cared at the time? They were plastic heavy and incredibly cool. So what about you? Which moment from Terminator 2, 1991, do you remember most? Leave a comment, and if you want to continue uncovering other deleted scenes from Hollywood's golden age, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. You'll be surprised at what Hollywood has kept hidden from you for decades.